The universe has strange ways of bringing people together when they need each other most. Sometimes love finds us in the most unexpected places, like hospital room 418, where chaos and destiny collided on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. If you believe in miracles, you're about to witness one unfold. If you don't, this story might change your mind. If this journey touches your heart, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel for more stories that remind us of the extraordinary power of human connection. Michael Reeves never planned on chasing his 3 5-year-olds through the pediatric floor of St. Mary's Hospital that afternoon. The 34-year-old construction manager had only brought the triplets, Lily, Lucas, and Liam, for Lucas's routine checkup after an ear infection. But anyone who's raised children knows that plans and reality rarely align, especially with triplets whose energy seemed inversely proportional to their size. "Don't touch that. Come back here," Michael called out, his voice a mixture of authority and exhaustion that every single parent knows too well. The triplets had bolted the moment the nurse stepped out of the examination room, scattering in different directions like marbles on a hardwood floor. Lily, with her dark curls bouncing, led the charge down the corridor, her brothers close behind, their identical mischievous grins mirroring each other. Michael had been doing this solo for 3 years now, ever since Caroline had decided that motherhood and marriage weren't for her after all. The note she'd left simply said, "I can't do this." No explanation, no forwarding address. Just those 4 words that had shattered his world and left him solely responsible for 3 toddlers who hadn't yet turned 2. The years since had been a blur of sleepless nights, working double shifts when he could get childcare, and learning to braid hair and kiss scraped knees. His parents helped when they could, but they lived 2 states away. Friends had drifted away, unable to accommodate the chaos of his new normal. Michael's world had shrunk to his children and his responsibilities, until that day in the hospital. He finally cornered Lucas and Liam near the water fountain, but Lily had vanished. Panic rising in his throat, he scooped up the boys, one under each arm, and continued his search. "Lily," he called out, trying to keep his voice calm despite the fear gnawing at his insides. "Lily, this isn't funny." That's when he heard the giggling coming from behind a partially closed door, room 418. Relief flooding through him, Michael nudged the door open with his foot, the twins still wriggling under his arms. "I'm so sorry," he began, stepping into the room. "My daughter." But the words died in his throat as he took in the scene before him. Lily sat perched on the edge of a hospital bed, chatting animatedly to a woman who couldn't be much older than Michael himself. The woman was pale, almost translucent, with dark shadows under her eyes that spoke of prolonged suffering. But despite this, she was smiling, truly smiling, at Lily's animated storytelling. And then Mr. Whiskers climbed all the way up the tree, and Daddy had to get the big ladder, and he was so scared. Lily was saying, her small hands gesturing wildly. The woman laughed, a sound like wind chimes that seemed to brighten the sterile room. "Your daddy sounds very brave," she said, her voice surprisingly strong despite her frail appearance. "He is," Lily agreed seriously. "He's the bravest daddy in the whole world." Michael felt a lump form in his throat. In the daily grind of parenting, he rarely got to see himself through his children's eyes. The woman looked up then, noticing him in the doorway with the boys under his arms, and her smile widened. "I believe this belongs to you," she said, gesturing toward Lily. "She's been telling me all about Mr. Whisker's great escape." "I'm so sorry for the intrusion," Michael said, finally finding his voice. "Lily, you know better than to run into strangers' rooms." "But she's not a stranger anymore, Daddy," Lily protested with the impeccable logic of a 5-year-old. "This is Miss Ellie, and she's sad because she's sick, but I made her laugh." The woman, Ellie, gave a slight shrug. "She's not wrong. This is the most I've laughed in weeks." She extended a hand that seemed too delicate to shake. "Eleanor, right? But everyone calls me Ellie." "Michael Reeves," he replied, awkwardly shifting the boys to free a hand. "And these are Lucas and Liam." I see you've already met Lily, our self-appointed welcome committee. The famous triplets, Ellie nodded. Lily's been catching me up on all your adventures. Michael noticed the 4 in her arm, the monitors beeping softly beside her bed, the collection of medicine bottles on the bedside table. This wasn't a casual hospital stay. Whatever Ellie was facing was serious. We should let you rest, he said, suddenly aware they were intruding on someone clearly ill. Lily, say goodbye to Miss Ellie. But I'm not finished telling her about the time we made pancakes and the smoke alarm went off. Lily protested. Ellie laughed again. I'd actually love to hear the end of that story, if you don't mind, she said, looking at Michael with eyes that held something he couldn't quite identify, longing, perhaps, or simple appreciation for the chaos his children brought to the quiet room. Against his better judgment, Michael found himself setting the boys down and taking a seat in the visitor's chair. Well, it all started because I thought I could flip pancakes one-handed while holding a sippy cup. An hour passed like minutes. Ellie was easy to talk to, laughing at all the right moments in his stories of single dad mishaps, asking thoughtful questions about the triplets. The children, normally shy with strangers, warmed to her immediately. Even reserved Liam crawled onto the foot of her bed to show her his favorite action figure. It wasn't until a nurse came in with Ellie's medication that Michael realized how long they'd stayed. We should get going, he said, gathering the kids. Let these professionals do their job. Will we see Miss Ellie again? Lucas asked, his lower lip already trembling. Michael hesitated, looking to Ellie, unsure what to say. This wasn't like promising to return to a playground or a friend's house. This was a hospital room, and Ellie was clearly fighting something serious. I'll be here a while, Ellie said simply, answering the unspoken question. Visitors are welcome between 2 and 8. Even tiny hurricanes. She winked at the triplets, who beamed back at her. As they walked out, Lily's small hand in his, Michael felt a strange reluctance to leave. At the door, he turned back. Would it be okay if we came back tomorrow? Maybe bring some decent coffee and adult conversation? The smile that lit up Ellie's face was answer enough. Back in the car, buckling 3 squirming children into their car seats, Michael found himself thinking about Ellie's smile, the way it transformed her face despite the pallor of illness. For the first time in 3 years, he felt a flicker of something he'd thought long extinguished, curiosity about someone outside his immediate family circle. Daddy, is Miss Ellie going to die? Lily asked suddenly from the back seat, her voice small but direct in the way only children can be. Michael's hands froze on Liam's seatbelt. Why would you ask that, sweetie? Because she has the same tubes Grandpa had before he went to heaven, Lucas chimed in. And she looks tired like he did. Children saw everything. Michael had learned this the hard way. They noticed the unpaid bills on the counter, the nights he skipped dinner so they could have seconds, the way his smile sometimes didn't reach his eyes. Of course they'd recognize the signs of serious illness. I don't know what's wrong with Miss Ellie, he said honestly. But hospitals are good places with doctors who help people get better. We should bring her flowers, Lily decided. Pink ones. And a drawing. I'll make her the best drawing ever. And so began their daily visits to room 418. Each day after school and work, they'd stop by with small offerings, childish drawings, wildflowers picked from the hospital garden, a paperback novel Ellie had mentioned wanting to read. Michael would bring real coffee from the shop across the street, and they'd talk while the kids played quietly, or not so quietly, in the corner of the room. It was during their 4th visit that Michael finally asked the question that had been hanging between them. What are you in for? If you don't mind me asking. Ellie's smile dimmed slightly. Acute myeloid leukemia. It's a type of blood cancer. She said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity. 2nd round of treatment. The first didn't take. Michael felt his chest tighten. I'm sorry. Don't be, she said, watching the triplets build a fortress of pillows on the floor. I'm not. Not today anyway. Her eyes met his. Having you guys visit, it makes this bearable. What's your prognosis? He asked, then immediately regretted the bluntness of the question. Ellie didn't seem to mind. 50-50. Maybe less. Depends on whether this round of chemo works and if I can get a bone marrow transplant. She smiled wryly. No compatible siblings, and the registry hasn't found a match yet. Michael wanted to say something comforting, but platitudes seemed insulting to someone facing what Ellie was facing. Instead, he asked, "What did you do before all this?" "I was a children's book illustrator," she said, her face brightening. "Still am, technically, though it's hard to work from here. My editor's been patient." That explained why she was so good with the kids, why her room was filled with colorful sketches and half-finished drawings. It also explained the ease with which she'd drawn Lily out of her shell, encouraged Lucas's storytelling, and connected with quiet Liam through art. "The kids would love to see your work," Michael said. Ellie reached for a portfolio beside her bed. "Well, you're in luck. I happen to have some samples right here." The next hour was spent looking through Ellie's illustrations, whimsical animals with human expressions, magical landscapes that seemed to leap off the page, children of all shapes and sizes embarking on grand adventures. The triplets were enthralled, especially when Ellie sketched quick portraits of each of them, capturing their essence with a few deft strokes of her pencil. "You're amazing," Michael said, and meant it. "I've had a lot of practice," she replied modestly. "Hospital stays give you plenty of time to hone your craft." As the days turned into weeks, their visits became the highlight of Michael's day. The triplets would race through homework and dinner, eager to see their Ellie. And Michael found himself sharing things he hadn't told anyone, his fears about raising the triplets alone, the soul-crushing exhaustion of single parenthood, even the hurt of Caroline's abandonment. In turn, Ellie opened up about her own struggles, the diagnosis that had come just as her career was taking off, the friends who couldn't handle her illness and had drifted away, her parents who had died in a car accident when she was in college, leaving her essentially alone in the world. "That's why the children are such a gift," she told him one evening as they watched the triplets coloring quietly, a rare moment of calm. "They don't see me as a cancer patient. To them, I'm just Miss Ellie who draws cool pictures and tells silly stories." "They adore you," Michael said. "We all do." The words slipped out before he could stop them, hanging in the air between them. Ellie's eyes widened slightly, but before she could respond, a team of doctors entered the room for evening rounds. Michael gathered the kids, making their usual promises to return tomorrow, his heart pounding with the realization that he might have just crossed a line. What was he thinking? Ellie was fighting for her life. The last thing she needed was the complication of his feelings, especially when her future was so uncertain. That night, after putting the triplets to bed, Michael sat alone in his kitchen, turning a cold cup of coffee between his hands. He was falling for a woman who might not survive the year. It was madness. Irresponsible, even. The triplets had already lost one mother. Could he risk them becoming attached to someone else they might lose? But it was too late for such practical considerations. Ellie had already woven herself into the fabric of their lives. The kids talked about her constantly. Lily had started drawing more, inspired by Ellie's art. Lucas asked questions about hospitals and medicine, curious about how doctors were helping their Ellie. And Liam, who rarely spoke to anyone outside the family, had sat beside Ellie's bed for an entire hour the previous day, quietly showing her his treasure collection of rocks and bottle caps. As for Michael himself, he couldn't remember the last time he'd connected with someone the way he had with Ellie. In the sterile environment of the hospital, surrounded by the evidence of her mortality, they had found something alive and growing. The next day, Michael arrived at the hospital alone, having dropped the kids at his neighbor's after school. He needed to talk to Ellie without little ears listening, to clear the air after his unplanned confession. But room 418 was empty, the bed stripped, the walls bare of the artwork that had accumulated over the weeks. Panic seized him. Had something happened? Had he missed his chance to say, what? Goodbye? More? A nurse he recognized from previous visits saw him standing frozen in the doorway. Are you looking for Eleanor, right? She asked. Yes, Michael managed. Where is she? She was moved to the ICU early this morning, the nurse said, her expression professional but sympathetic. Her numbers crashed overnight. Family only in the ICU, I'm afraid. She doesn't have family, Michael said, his voice hollow. She has us. The nurse hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. 4th floor. Room 4. I didn't tell you that. Michael thanked her and headed for the elevators, his heart racing. In the ICU, the atmosphere was different, tenser, quieter, the air heavy with the gravity of critical conditions. He found room 4 and peered through the window in the door. Ellie lay surrounded by machines, looking smaller and more vulnerable than he'd ever seen her. Her eyes were closed, her breathing shallow. An older nurse was adjusting something on one of the monitors. Michael tapped gently on the glass. The nurse looked up, frowned, and came to the door. Family only, she said firmly before he could speak. Please, Michael said. She doesn't have family. He hesitated, then decided truth was simpler than lies. I'm someone who cares about her. Deeply. Please, just 5 minutes. The nurse studied his face, then sighed. 5 minutes. And if anyone asks, you're her fiancé. Michael stepped into the room, the antiseptic smell stronger here than in Ellie's regular room. The beeping of monitors created a mechanical symphony that made his skin crawl. He approached the bed slowly, afraid to disturb any of the equipment keeping her alive. Ellie, he said softly. Her eyes fluttered open, taking a moment to focus on his face. Recognition dawned, followed by a weak smile. Michael, she whispered. No kids today? Just me, he said, carefully taking her hand, mindful of the 4. What happened? Infection, she said. My immune system's shot from the chemo. They're pumping me full of antibiotics. Her eyes closed briefly. Sorry about the drama. Don't apologize, Michael said. Just focus on getting better. She opened her eyes again, a shadow crossing her face. Michael, we need to talk about what you said yesterday. Not now, he said quickly. You need to rest. No, she insisted, her voice stronger. Now. Because I might not have a lot of later. She took a shaky breath. You and the kids have become so important to me. More than I ever expected. But you need to understand what you're getting into. Best case scenario, I beat this, but there's a good chance I can't have children of my own after all the treatment. Worst case. I don't care, Michael interrupted. The kids and I, we love you exactly as you are, Ellie. Cancer and all. And the triplets are more than enough family for anyone. Tears welled in her eyes. You hardly know me. I know enough, he said simply. I know you're kind and talented and brave. I know my children light up around you. I know talking to you is the easiest thing I've ever done. He squeezed her hand gently. The rest, we can figure out together. If you want to. A tear slipped down her cheek. What if I don't make it? The question hung between them, impossible to ignore, impossible to answer with any certainty. Michael felt his own eyes burning. Then we'll have had this time together, he finally said. And the kids and I will have known you, loved you. That would be worth it. Worth everything. Ellie's monitor beeped more rapidly, matching the acceleration of her heart rate. You're making me cry, she accused weakly. Bad for my electrolytes. Michael laughed, wiping away his own tears. Sorry. I'll try to be less romantic. No, she whispered. Don't you dare. The nurse returned then, pointing meaningfully at her watch. Michael nodded, understanding his time was up. The kids will want to visit, he said. Once you're back in a regular room. Tell them I miss them, Ellie said. Tell them I'm fighting hard to get better. I will, he promised. At the door, he turned back. And Ellie? We'll be waiting. However long it takes. The next 3 weeks were the hardest. Ellie remained in the ICU, fighting the infection that had threatened to overwhelm her compromised immune system. Michael visited daily, sometimes just for a few minutes between work and picking up the kids. The triplets drew pictures and dictated messages that Michael delivered faithfully. Slowly, Ellie began to improve. The infection retreated, her numbers stabilized, and eventually, she was moved back to a regular room, not 418, which had been assigned to another patient, but 422, just down the hall. The triplets' reunion with Ellie was emotional for everyone. They climbed carefully onto her bed, mindful of her tubes and wires as Michael had instructed, and showed her all the artwork they'd created during her absence. Lily had written a story about a princess who fought a dragon called Cancer with the help of her 3 magical helpers. Lucas had constructed a model hospital out of Legos. And Liam had saved every interesting rock and leaf he'd found, storing them in a shoebox labeled, "For Miss Ellie when she's better." Watching them together, Michael felt a certainty settle over him. This was right. This was family. However uncertain the future, this was where they all belonged. As summer turned to fall, Ellie's condition improved enough for day passes from the hospital. Michael would pick her up in the morning, wheelchair and medical supplies loaded in the back of his SUV, and they'd spend the day at parks, museums, or simply at his home, where Ellie would rest on the couch while the triplets played nearby. On one such day, as they sat on a park bench watching the kids chase each other around a playground, Ellie turned to Michael with an expression he couldn't quite read. "They found a match," she said simply. Michael's heart leaped. "For the bone marrow transplant?" She nodded. "Someone in Germany. The transplant team says we're good to go as soon as the donor's cells arrive. They're prepping me next week." "That's amazing." Michael pulled her into a careful hug. "When were you going to tell me?" "I just did," she laughed, the sound muffled against his shoulder. "I only found out this morning." This calls for a celebration, Michael decided, calling the triplets over. When they came running, cheeks flushed with exertion, he shared the news in terms they could understand. Miss Ellie was getting special medicine that might make her all better. "Like a magic potion?" Lily asked, eyes wide. "Something like that," Ellie smiled. "But I'll have to stay in the hospital for a long time afterward, and I might not feel very good for a while." "We'll bring you popsicles," Lucas declared. "When I had my tonsils out, popsicles made everything better." "And we'll draw you pictures," Liam added quietly. "So you won't forget us." "Oh, sweetheart," Ellie said, opening her arms to gather all 3 children close. "I could never forget you. Not in a million years." Over the children's heads, her eyes met Michael's, a question in them. He nodded slightly, understanding. Tonight, after the kids were asleep, they would talk about the future, their future, whatever it might hold. The bone marrow transplant was scheduled for October 15th. The day before, Michael brought the triplets to the hospital to say goodbye, explaining that they wouldn't be able to see Ellie for several weeks after the procedure. "Your job," he told them, "is to make things for Ellie's homecoming. We want the house to be perfect when she's finally well enough to visit again." The kids took this assignment seriously, each promising Ellie elaborate welcome home creations. As they were leaving, Lily turned back at the door. "Miss Ellie," she said solemnly, "when you get better, are you going to be our new mommy?" The room went silent. Michael froze, unsure how to handle this unexpected question. He and Ellie had discussed a future together, but they'd been careful not to put labels or timelines on anything while her health remained precarious. Ellie looked at Lily, then at Michael, her expression softening. "Would you like that, Lily?" she asked gently. Lily nodded emphatically. "You already love us, and we already love you. And Daddy smiles more when you're around. Real smiles, not the pretend ones he used to do." Michael felt his chest tighten at his daughter's perceptiveness. He'd had no idea she'd noticed the difference. "Well," Ellie said carefully, "that's something your daddy and I would need to talk about. But I do love you all very much, and nothing would make me happier than being part of your family someday." It was the perfect answer, honest, but leaving room for reality, for the hurdles still ahead. Michael squeezed Ellie's hand in silent gratitude. The transplant itself was anticlimactic after all the preparation, a bag of donor cells that looked like a simple blood transfusion, dripping into Ellie's veins over a few hours. But the aftermath was brutal. Ellie was moved to isolation to protect her non-existent immune system, and for weeks, Michael could only see her through a glass window or via video calls, watching helplessly as she endured the side effects of the transplant: nausea, fatigue, mouth sores, temporary hair loss. Through it all, Ellie maintained her sense of humor. "Good thing you fell for me before I went bald," she joked during one video call, modeling the colorful head scarf Lily had picked out for her. "I think you're beautiful," Michael said simply. "Besides, it'll grow back. It might come in curly," she warned. "Or a different color. That happens sometimes after transplants. As long as it's not neon green, I think we'll manage," he teased, earning a genuine laugh from her. By December, Ellie's new immune system was functioning well enough for limited visitors. The triplets, after being thoroughly scrubbed and masked, were allowed to see her for the first time in nearly 2 months. They were initially shy, intimidated by the changes in her appearance and the sterile environment, but Ellie soon had them giggling with a puppet show performed with surgical gloves blown up like balloons. As Christmas approached, Ellie's doctors began discussing discharge plans. She would need close monitoring and frequent clinic visits, but if her progress continued, she could leave the hospital by the new year. "You could stay with us," Michael offered immediately when she shared the news. "The guest room is all set up, and the kids would love having you there." Ellie hesitated. "Are you sure?" "It's a big commitment, Michael. I'll still be pretty useless for a while. Tired all the time, lots of medications, frequent doctor visits." "I'm raising triplets, Ellie," he reminded her with a smile. "I think I can handle one recovering transplant patient." And so, on January 3rd, almost exactly 6 months after Lily had first wandered into room 418, Ellie came home with them. The triplets had decorated the house with welcome banners and artwork, and Mrs. Peterson from next door had organized a meal train among the neighbors, ensuring that Michael wouldn't have to worry about cooking on top of everything else. The adjustment wasn't always smooth. Ellie's recovery had good days and bad days. Sometimes she had enough energy to read to the triplets or help with simple art projects, other days, she could barely make it from the bed to the couch. Michael learned to administer her medications, recognize signs of potential complications, and balance the needs of his children with Ellie's care. But there were beautiful moments too. The first time Ellie felt well enough to help make pancakes, without setting off the smoke alarm. The afternoon she sat in the backyard with Liam, silently painting rocks together in the spring sunshine. The evening when Lucas fell asleep against her side while she read him a story, trusting her completely. By summer, Ellie's health had stabilized enough that her doctors reduced her clinic visits to once a month. Her hair was growing back, slightly darker and with a wave that hadn't been there before, and her energy levels were almost normal. She had started working again, illustrating from Michael's dining room table while the kids were at school. On a warm July evening, nearly a year after their first meeting, Michael took Ellie back to the hospital, not for a medical appointment, but to visit the garden where they had often walked during her day passes. The triplets were with Mrs. Peterson for the evening, giving them a rare moment alone. As they sat on a bench surrounded by roses, Michael took Ellie's hand. "Do you remember what Lily asked you, the day before your transplant?" Ellie smiled. "If I was going to be their new mommy." "You gave a very diplomatic answer," he said. "But I've been wondering what your real answer would have been, if you hadn't been trying to be careful." She looked at him, her eyes bright. "I would have said yes. In a heartbeat." Michael reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "What about now?" Ellie's breath caught as he opened the box to reveal a simple, elegant ring. "Michael. I know it's been a crazy year," he said. "And I know we can't predict what the future holds. But I do know that I love you, and the triplets love you, and life is better with you in it. So, Eleanor Wright, will you marry me and officially become the world's bravest stepmom to 3 tiny hurricanes?" Tears spilled down Ellie's cheeks as she nodded. "Yes," she managed. "Yes to all of it." They were married 2 months later in a small ceremony in the hospital garden, with the triplets serving as flower girl and ring bearers. Dr. Chen, who had overseen Ellie's treatment from the beginning, was there. So was the nurse who had bent the rules to let Michael visit the ICU that critical day. Even Caroline sent a card, her first communication in years, wishing them happiness. Lily insisted on making a speech at the reception, standing on a chair to reach the microphone. "Once upon a time," she began in her clear 5-year-old voice, "there were 3 kids who ran away from their daddy in the hospital, and they found the most beautiful, kindest lady who was very sick. And now she's our new mommy, and she's not sick anymore, and we all love each other very much." The end. It wasn't quite the end, of course. There would be follow-up appointments and occasional health scares. There would be the everyday challenges of blending lives and raising children. There would be moments of doubt and fear. But there would also be love, the kind of love that finds you when you're not looking, that grows in the most unlikely places, that sees beyond illness and single parenthood and all the reasons to be cautious. The kind of love that turns wrong turns into right ones, and transforms hospital rooms into the beginnings of home. As Michael looked around at his new wife and his children, he thought about the chain of events that had brought them here: Lily's escape down the hospital corridor, the wrong turn into room 418, the conversations that had turned into friendship, then love. How different their lives might have been if Lucas hadn't had an ear infection that day, if the triplets hadn't run wild, if he'd caught Lily before she found Ellie's room. Some might call it coincidence. Others, fate. Michael preferred to think of it as a reminder that sometimes, the best things in life come from our most chaotic moments, from chasing triplets down hospital corridors and into the unknown.